A disappointing end to the 2024 season after going undefeated through the Big Ten championship. The Oregon Ducks are looking to rebound in 2025 and hopefully make a further push into the postseason. Next year looks to start off pretty strong. Even though Montana State is one of the better teams in the FCS, we fully expect the Ducks to win this game, as well as beat the lowly Oklahoma State Cowboys after a very bad season in the Big 12, and then another pretty bad team in Northwestern out of the Big 10. All of these should be pretty easy wins for Oregon to set up them going into the Oregon State game at home at 3-0.
And for the in-state rivalry game, I think it's going to be renewed in a sense because Oregon State's looking like a pretty solid team. They are bringing in Malik Murphy, transfer quarterback from Duke, after a very solid season last year, leading Duke to yet another impressive season in the ACC. I think this Oregon State team is going to be pretty competitive against the Ducks team. That being said, I do think the Ducks are still by far the superior team, even though Dante Moore is maybe not going to be the star quarterback that everyone is expecting him to be. Who knows? It's a little too far out to say, but I think the weapons around him are going to help him a ton. They got Mekhi Hughes coming in from Tulane after posting 1,400 yards on the ground last year. A lot of wide receiver weapons have stayed, even though some have gone off to the NFL draft. Defense is still looking good. Oregon is going to be the better team in this rivalry game. And with it being at Autzen, that's going to be a huge difference maker.
Yeah, I think it's going to be maybe a little closer than some people are expecting, but the Ducks really should get this win. It would certainly be a shocking upset, but this is one of the years that maybe Oregon State could finally pull it off again. Next up is a road trip to Penn State, and this is going to be a really, really good game. Penn State is bringing back a ton of talent from last year's team, though, including Drew Aller, Nick Singleton, and Katron Allen on the offense, as well as boosting their defense with Jim Knowles, defensive coordinator from Ohio State, who led the top defense in the country last year. Penn State has really loaded this team up for success. They have the home field advantage here. We think that Oregon is going to drop a regular season game this season and do it early on the road in Happy Valley.
Yeah, and this isn't so much a knock on Oregon. It's just Penn State has so much senior leadership returning, along with a ton of young guys on this defensive line that are just going to wreak havoc. They've already started drawing comparisons to Abdul Carter, Chop Robinson, and Micah Parsons, just to name a few. And that's also not to mention that they got Trevor Pena out of the transfer portal from Syracuse, a really good wide receiver that's going to be a key weapon for Drew Aller with the departure of Tyler Warren. Oregon does get a pretty nice bye week though after that Penn State game. Gives them time to reset, whether it's after a loss like we're predicting, or if they do somehow manage to get a win at Happy Valley. And they're going into a game against Indiana. Indiana with Kurt Cignetti after a college football playoff appearance last year, losing to Notre Dame. But this Indiana team is still going to be pretty solid. They're replacing Curtis Rourke with Fernando Mendoza, transfer quarterback from Cal, and he's been projected in the top 10 in mock drafts for the 2026 NFL draft next year. So I think he's going to be a very welcome addition to the Big Ten and one that's going to cause some problems, but I still think Oregon's defense is going to be able to handle him, especially considering that this is at Autzen once again, one of the toughest places to play. We saw in the Ohio State game last year that the stadium environment did cause some issues. And Indiana, that's a long road trip for them. I think they're going to see some regression from last season just because they have a little bit more difficult of a schedule. And I think Oregon's going to get back in the win column here with a big win over a good Hoosiers team.
Yeah, I definitely think Indiana has a pretty similar talent level to last season, but like Connor was just saying, with the home field advantage, the Ducks should be able to get this win. The next game, a lot easier. Even though they're going on a long road trip, they are facing the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Greg Schiano done a pretty solid job with the program considering what they were when he took over, but Rutgers is never going to be a top team in the Big Ten. They just can't bring in talent the same way that these top programs like Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State and Michigan can. Really, this is just going to be another pretty easy win for the Ducks as they'll move to 6-1.
Following week is against the Wisconsin Badgers. Another pretty disappointing season under Luke Fickell, and this schedule that the Badgers have for next season is awful. I think they play like our top 10 teams in the Big Ten, and their non-conference includes Alabama. Luke Fickell is coaching for his job, and they did not help him out with that schedule. And having to go on the road to face the Ducks is not going to help. We saw Wisconsin almost upset the Ducks last season at Camp Randall until Oregon mounted that comeback. But I think now that the script is flipped, it's going to be a blowout win for the Ducks here. Wisconsin's probably at their lowest, and Oregon is going to be looking to make a bit of a statement and have to fight back a little bit in these Big Ten standings after dropping that early one to Penn State. So a huge win over Wisconsin for those Big Ten standings.
They got their second bye week this season during that first week of November and then hit the ground running on the road to face Iowa. This one shouldn't be too terribly difficult either. The Hawkeyes are bringing in South Dakota State transfer Mark Gronowski at quarterback. And I think that while he maybe will slightly improve the Iowa offense, there's still a lot that needs to be fixed there. I don't think they can do it all in one season. The Hawkeyes should have a good defense per usual. I'd expect this to be a relatively low scoring game, but the Ducks will pull away and move to 8-1.
Once again, that's a big win. Like you said, that second bye week coming at the first week of November is going to be huge because that is the Penn State at Ohio State game. Both teams will most likely be going into that game undefeated in Big Ten play. And with Oregon dropping that early game to Penn State, they just get to sit back and watch and see who they have to compete with down the stretch of the season. And whether it's Ohio State or Penn State, it's going to make a difference because Ohio State's going to have Michigan at the end of the season. I think Penn State's end to the season is pretty easy outside of that Ohio State game. So it's going to be interesting down the stretch of the season, especially with Oregon having Minnesota next. Not a pushover of a game. You have Darius Taylor coming back, who is going to be probably a top five running back in the Big Ten next season. Minnesota is just very consistent. PJ Fleck has done a fantastic job of keeping this Minnesota program in the mix every single year. While they haven't broken through to the top tier, they're still a very good team that can't just brush off as any other game. But given the fact that this is a long road trip for the Golden Gophers against this Ducks team that is playing for the college football playoff appearance and a Big Ten championship appearance in back-to-back seasons, I think they get the job done.
Maybe a little bit closer than some people are expecting. Oregon could get caught looking ahead to their next two opponents, both former Pac-12 teams. The first one being the USC Trojans. This one is at home, though, certainly going to help out Oregon. I think, again, USC could make this a good game. Oregon is clearly the more talented team. Jordan Mailata taking over at quarterback after filling in for Miller Moss, who eventually transferred away to Louisville. I think USC overall is going to have a solid program in 2025, just not nearly as good as Oregon. With the Ducks being at home, this one should move Oregon to 10-1.
Yeah, USC is just pretty depleted right now. They lose a couple big players to the transfer portal. Did get a couple nice replacements, but I think Jordan Maiava is going to have his hands full this season. But I do think USC has room to improve and could see some improvement next season. Finally, they have their rivalry game against Washington. This time it is at Husky Stadium. And Washington, I think, is a little underrated going into next year. They have a very young quarterback in Damon Williams Jr. stepping in after he played in a couple games for Will Rogers last year. Very good dual threat quarterback, explosive player, and offensively, they have a lot of weapons to help him out, including returning their starting running back in Jonah Coleman. I think this Washington team can compete with Oregon, especially in a rivalry game. We saw 2 years ago when Washington was able to beat Oregon twice in the same season. I think that it's going to be a very competitive game once again, but I think at the end of the day, Dan Lanning is going to be able to get the job done and will his team to victory. I think he's going to be able to turn Dante Moore into a very good quarterback throughout the course of the season and in the last game, competing for a college football playoff appearance.
Yeah, I definitely think that Washington could be a dark horse in the Big Ten this season. There's a chance that they upset Oregon in that last game. However, like Connor said, we're going to go with the Ducks in our official predictions. Now, our way too early projection was 9.65 wins for Oregon and 11 and 1 overall. That projection has dipped slightly to 9.4 wins with 6.75 Big Ten wins. However, the prediction stayed the same. We still believe that the Ducks will be 11 and 1 in 2025, with that loss being to Penn State. The floor going to be 9 and 3, 7 wins, 2 losses in the Big Ten. Most likely that second loss going to be to Washington, and the out of conference game would be Oregon State. The ceiling, though, 12 and 0. The Ducks are one of very few teams that have the talent to pull it off. They did it last season, and they can do it again. However, 11 and 1, the prediction for Oregon in 2025. So, thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.